Okay, good evening, everybody. I really wanted to talk maybe something about the impeachment, about the ridiculousness of what the obstruction of Congress being a high crime and a misdemeanor. I mean, obstruction of Congress is the job of the executive branch. I mean, I don't understand what we're talking about here. Obstruction of Congress. What does that mean? But instead, I'll be a nice guy and I'll answer one of our comments because still a small channel and I can still do that, thankfully. Exclamation point, question mark said, or was it question mark, exclamation point? I don't remember. It's asked what is my opinion about the modern day Samaritans. It was funny that we're bringing this up because today one of my coworkers, there's this obsession at my job with Seinfeld. I mean, my supervisors and their cohorts, they begin their day sipping coffee out of their Seinfeld-themed coffee mugs, and everything becomes a reference to Seinfeld. And I said to the one full-time employee that I supervise, and then I have a group of volunteers and part-time contract employees I supervise as well. But my one full-time employee that I supervise, I was telling him how, I know everybody up front here reference everything to Seinfeld, and I reference everything to The Simpsons, but I love Seinfeld. And this coworker of mine, he's a Catholic deacon, he said that he hadn't seen Seinfeld in a long time, and then he turned on, I guess, TBS or something, and watched a few hours of Seinfeld episodes, and they were playing the last episode, and I was laughing about, the Good Samaritan laws. He brought up what the lawyer was saying, like, you don't have to help anybody. That's your right. and how Kramer was like, oh, the Samaritans, they were a very helpful people, because apparently by not helping somebody, Jerry Seinfeld and his friends there were arrested for violating a Good Samaritan law. Now, this term Good Samaritan is one that's kind of irksome to Jews, actually. I'm not going to go as far as someone like Tuvia Singer would say to say that it's anti-Semitic, or that the parable of the Good Samaritan is anti-Semitic. I don't think that's necessarily true, and of course the perception, the fact is that nobody is interpreting it as that today. But it is strange, to be sure, that in this parable you go from the priest to the Levite and you skip over the Israelite and you go right to the Samaritan. So it is uncomfortable, and but certainly it was pointing out that it was somewhat out of context and unexpected to find a Good Samaritan in those days. It was, and even if you want to try and say that it was trying to paint the traditional Jews as some kind of a racist group or this or that, the truth is today, at least, it's the opposite. And like I've constantly mentioned, Judaism is certainly welcoming of converts, and that the story of Shmaya Naphtalian with the high priest, I don't know if I have to mention again, of how they said, better he who was a son of Gentiles but acts like Aaron than the son of Aaron who doesn't act like Aaron. So all of that is quite interesting. demonstrating that it's not necessarily the yichus, the lineage, that's important according to the rabbis of the Talmud. Although it is important when the way it's been expressed popularly today is that yichus is like a bunch of zeros, and you have to decide: are you going to be a 1 in front of the zeros, or are you going to be a 0 in front of the zeros? A 0 in front of a bunch of zeros is nothing, whereas a 1 in a bunch of zeros is going to be going to put you higher in the decimal points. It could be a million, a billion, a trillion, right? Even a Google or a Googleplex, right? And so that's the question: is it going to be that 1 before the zeros, or just going to be another 0, and then a bunch of zeros is just 0? And like the story of Rebbe Melech, they say that when he was a child, it was Rahman al-Islan, there should never be, but there was a fire in the house of Rebbe Melech, and he and his mother, and when he was a child, and his mother said, "Oh, we destroyed the yichus brivel was lost, their family tree was lost." He said, "Don't worry, I'll make a new one," meaning it'll start from him, from the Rebbe Melech himself. It'll be a big yichus to say it from the Rebbe Melech. But of course, the most classical point to bring out was the Mishnah that we know, where it discusses, how the Kohen Gadol comes before a regular Kohen, and then the Kohen comes before a Levi, and the Levi comes before Yisrael, and v'chulu v'chulu until you get to the Ger, and then you get to the Nisin, and then the Mamzer, and so forth, and the Shtuki and the Sufi. But then it ends off, and it says that the Mamzer Talmud Chochem comes before the Kohen Gadol Am Haaretz in all places, and the fact was you had such a thing, a Kohen Gadol Am Haaretz. It sounds strange to us, but there was such a thing. And so the Mamzer Talmud Chochem comes first. I hope I don't need to translate all these words, because meaning a priest precedes a Levite, and a Levite precedes the Israelite, and so forth. And but that's only when everybody's equal in their merits. But if you have a high priest who is an ignoramus, and you have a bastard who is a pious scholar, the pious scholar who comes from a bastardized lineage is deserving of more honor than the high priest who is the ignoramus. But if they're both Talmidei Chachamim, the Mamzer and the Talmud Chacham and the Kohen Gadol are both Talmidei Chachamim, they're both scholars, they're both pious scholars. So then you do honor the Kohen Gadol first. But you can show respect to everybody. Just because you're going to show somebody first, respect doesn't mean that they are any greater. It's kind of what was classically said in the Orthodox churches, certainly before the schism, that the Bishop of Rome would be the first among equals. And I'm not saying that as a authority, but rather as an authoritative source, but rather as a comparative source, as a what's the word I'm trying to think of? An analogy, a mashal. But that's the case that we have here, is that in Judaism, a Kohen is the first among equals. We are all equal human beings, but we show respect first to the Kohen, and then we show respect to the Levite, and then we show respect to the Israelite, and so forth. That being said, where does the Samaritan fall in? Before we get to the modern Samaritans, we have to discuss the history of the Samaritans. So, the Samaritans claim a different history, but we have our history that's in our scripture. And so I have to go by what my tradition says. Whereas the Samaritans claim that they're the original real Jews, and they call themselves Shomronim because they are the Shomrim, they are Shomer, they're the guardians of the tradition, and that they're the real Jews, kind of like what you hear from the Hebrew Israelites. You're not the real Jews, we're the real Jews. This is what the Samaritans believe, and that we corrupted the Torah, and that they have the original, which is ridiculous nonsense. But our tradition is as follows. I mean, we always call them not Shomronim, Samaritans, but we call them Kusim, Kuthians. Why are they called Kuthians? Because they came from a place, Kutha, and when the 10 lost tribes of Israel were taken away, the Kuthians, the Assyrians, settled the Kuthians in this area that we now call Samaria. And when they came to the Holy Land, they were being attacked by wild lions. This is all in the Bible, in the Book of Kings, 2 Kings. And Sefer Malachim Beis, and so it's in the Navi. And the Kuthians, they said it must be because we are offending the local God by worshiping our traditional gods, that we're being attacked by the wild lions. Now, people might say there are no lions in Israel today, wild lions. But the fact is that they, at that time, and until not too long ago, there lived lions, but they were hunted to extinction. And the Asiatic lion today exists as a separate subspecies from the African lion in one small province in India. But most likely, unless perhaps there was another subspecies that existed in the Middle East, most likely this subspecies that only a few hundred survive in India, one was the same that once was as far as the Holy Land, as Eretz Yisrael. And there are, of course, many stories of lions throughout the Bible. Excuse me. We know Samson encountered the lion. David spoke about lions, his encounters with them, so forth. And so here in the Book of Kings, at that late point in history, there were still lions in the Holy Land, and these lions were attacking the Kuthians who were settled there by the Assyrians. And so the Kuthians said, we must be being attacked by these lions because we're offending the local gods. And so they sought out advice on how to convert to the local religion. The thing was that the question is, was their conversion sincere? Meaning, one question was, did they still continue to worship their old gods? That would be a big problem. The other question is, did they, when they converted to our religion, was their intention, and we're talking about the time, thousands of years ago, 2,500 years ago, 2,300 years ago, something, was their intention that our God is the God of the universe, or that they believed that our God was merely the local God of this land, and they were still heathen or pagan in their ideology, but just recognized this God as the local God as opposed to the universal God. So for that reason, there was always this question about the Kusim. Were they Gerei Emes? Were they true converts? Or were they Gerei Arayos? Or were they converts because of lions? Meaning that because of their fear of being attacked by wild lions, they underwent a conversion that lacked sincerity. And so they were left as a matter of doubt and a matter of suspicion, and their conversions were suspicious. However, they continued to exist for a long time, and to this day, this community exists. And I have no reason to suppose that there's any falsehood in this claim that this community are the descendants of the Kuthians that came in the time of Sennacherib, of Sancherib, and underwent this conversion. And so some people are going to say, well, how is this any different than the Khazars? And of course you have the constant claim that's not based in reality that all of the Ashkenazim come from the Khazars, which is, scientifically not true. The Ashkenazi bloodline predates the Khazars, according to science, according to genetic science, that they can trace back all Ashkenazi Jews, or a vast majority of Ashkenazi Jews, to 4 women who lived in the time before the Khazars. And beyond that, there's the genetic markers that are common among both Sephardim and Ashkenazim, the Kohen gene and things like that, which halachically is insignificant, in my opinion at least, but scientifically is interesting. But the difference is the Khazars underwent an authentic, proper conversion, so it doesn't matter where they came from, what their ancestry was, because their conversion was valid. The Kuthians, we don't know if their conversion was valid or not. That's pretty much the issue that we have here. But what the rabbis taught about the Kuthians, about the Kusim, is that whatever commandments they accepted upon themselves, they accepted them upon themselves with more sincerity and devotion than the regular Jews. But they did not accept everything perfectly, and they were lacking something in their conversion. And so there's always these discussions about the halachic status of the Kuthians. And in general, what we say with all of these doubtful groups is that if they had a conversion and they did not follow laws of marriage and divorce properly, then we have another issue of a question of mamzerus, of bastardy. And whereas if the conversion was not valid, they can undergo a new conversion and be totally accepted. However, it's very rare for a Kuthian, for a Samaritan, a Shomroni, to actually want to undergo a rabbinical conversion. It happens every now and then. Or in Israeli society, you have some people of Samaritan heritage who decide that they want to become traditional Jews. But that's about it. I mean, and in ancient time there was wars with the Samaritans. I mean, the story that led up to the story of Hanukkah, took place earlier, was that Alexander the Great was about to siege Jerusalem because the Samaritans made a claim that the Jews were going to rebel against him. And then Shimon HaTzadik came out with his big day kahuna, which he wasn't supposed to do. But it was an Eis Lasos Lashem, and so he did it, and he was right for doing it. And when Alexander the Great came and saw the Kohen Gadol, Shimon HaTzadik, Simon the Just, he got off of his horse and bowed, and they said, "Why are you bowing to this Jew?" And he said, "What do you mean? Every time I go out to battle, I see a vision of a man that looks just like this, and shows me which way to go, so I should be successful in the battle." Which is an amazing story. And then they said that in reality, so Shimon HaTzadik said, in reality, it's the Samaritans who were lying, and so Alexander the Great attacked the Samaritans and destroyed their temple on hard reason. But to this day, the Samaritans still consider Har Gerizim to be the place of their temple. Even without a temple building there, they still offer this Paschal sacrifice every year. And they have their community, and that's what they're mostly famous for. They're mostly inbred people because they don't accept converts, and they don't marry out, and so they're very inbred community, and what they're most famous for is to get together for the Korban Pesach, and they still there was recently, I think it was this year or last year, National Geographic pictures of their Korban Pesach, of their Paschal sacrifice, which were fascinating to see. And you can look them up online. So that's all very good and interesting. Again, I really don't know very much about the modern Samaritan community other than what I've said until now. The one thing that people know if they listen to my videos, that I'm curiously a fan of Bishop Fulton Sheen. I find for years and years, I found him to be a very entertaining and interesting speaker and scholar and so forth, and I always enjoy reading something that he wrote or listening to his lectures and so forth. I don't do it very often, but every now and then, might even look on YouTube listen to one of Fulton Sheen's lectures. I enjoy them very much. Where I work, it's interesting. It's in the Protestant library. It's a Catholic book. They have Fulton Sheen's trip to the Holy Land. He went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. He brought his 2 nephews with him, and it's a picture book, like a photographic essay of his pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And one of the things that he discusses there is his encounter with the Samaritans and how they become somewhat of a tourist attraction that have been commercialized. He mentions there that they're inbred and so forth, but that he's just amazed by how this tribe became so commercialized that people want to go as a tourist attraction to go see the Samaritans. I never did it. I remember, someone who had hosted me for a Shabbos or Yontif meal mentioned that they were interested maybe in taking the kids to go see the Shomronim. Yeshivish Haredish family, they were talking about how as a tourist trip, as a tiul, that they were thinking maybe they want to take the kids to go see the Samaritans, offer their Paschal sacrifice on Erev Pesach. But Erev Pesach is such a busy time, we don't have time to go sightseeing, going on tiulim on a day like this. I don't believe. But that's pretty much what I know about the Samaritans. I'm not very knowledgeable about them. They're very similar to the Hebrew Israelites, except that at least the Samaritans have a traditional claim of conversion. It's very ancient and is verified, whereas the Hebrew Israelites, some of them do, some of them don't. We don't really know what their history is. I do believe a lot of them have, or the Orthodox Black Jews, which is a different group, are really the more, ones that I find that have some more authenticity to them. But still, I would require a Giur L'Chumrah for them, or a full Giur for the Orthodox Black Jews. What you have in Brooklyn, and I don't mean Black Jews who go to white synagogues. I mean, they're black synagogues for Black Jews that are Orthodox or Conservadox. Pretty much the followers of Rabbi Casper Fournier, who, I would consider him to be something like a Conservadox rabbi, but with a very African American tradition, and so his synagogue is an African American synagogue that follows very, very traditional practices, and that's nothing like the Black Hebrew Israelites. Even if that might have been where he came from, but he underwent a conservative conversion, and if he wanted to undergo an Orthodox conversion, it's almost offensive for me to suggest such a thing, because he's a spiritual leader in his community. But if he would want to, and anyone in his community, and they're observant, I think it should be welcomed and so forth. The Samaritan, but the Hebrew Israelites, they're the ones who are claiming, you're not the real Jews, we're the real Jews. Meaning Casper Fournier sees us as brothers as well, and his followers, they see us as we're all Jews, where they do not deny our Jewishness. And that's why some of them will seek an Orthodox conversion or a Geulah Chumrah or something. The Hebrew Israelites are the more racist group that consider us to be fakers, to be usurpers. And so too, this ancient tribe, the Samaritans, as far as I know, that is their belief as well. They have a different Torah that has, many different changes that are not in our traditional Torah. And that's pretty much the story of the Samaritans, what I have to share. All right, half hour is a good video runtime. Thank you for listening. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment. And we'll see you all later. Take care.